everyone, this is Kim from Write, Earn and Learn, and today I've got with me Brenden. He's from East Coast Radio, so welcome Brenden. My picture's really small because it's all about Brenden today, so I have to ask you, you were telling me a little bit earlier, but I'm going to ask you again, how did you start with East Coast Radio?
Well, it was 17 years ago as we were chatting, and a friend of mine worked at East Coast Radio, and he was on the creative side of things. And I was working in sales. I knew nothing about radio. And so he said to me, listen, we've got a vacancy here for a part-time copywriter. So I said, what is a copywriter? So he said, no, it's someone who writes scripts for the adverts. So I said, well, I've never done anything like that before. He said, but don't worry, you're creative, you'll be absolutely fine. So I tried out and wrote a few scripts and figured it out along the way, and they enjoyed my work, and slowly but surely I started doing more work and more writing. So absolutely love it. And then moved across into sales, and that's where I've been ever since.
Excellent. So you are the perfect person for us to chat to because you understand the writing heart. Everyone's passion when they start writing is to get their books out there, to be seen, have that visibility, bring their story to the world. But somewhere along the line, we get lost. So there are a lot of people that wrote one book and then their passion dies out. But if you were to sell more books, you probably find you get the fuel and the energy to keep going. One of those components is definitely publicity, and getting onto the radio is definitely a massive milestone for many authors. So tell us a little bit about what people need to prepare for when they go on to radio. So you got the slot, now what should you do to prepare for that interview?
That's a very good question. And I think motion is a key element. I always tell a lot of companies that imagine you have a child and you create the most amazing children's party for them with a jumping castle and beautiful snacks and beautiful outfits and an amazing cake, but you don't send the invitations out. And that's really what it's like not having promotion, is that you could write the most amazing book, but if you don't tell people about it, they're not going to read it. So radio is a medium that reaches so many people. And I think what radio does really well is it's very much a personal medium. So what that means is that each radio station caters for a particular tribe, if I can call it that. So I think the best thing you can do, first of all, is make sure that the target market that you're aiming for in your book aligns with the target market of the radio station. And that's probably the biggest advice I can get, because radio stations actually love stories. That's what radio's been doing for many years. So they love storytelling. So it's just about how do you, and we'll chat a bit more about that a little bit later, about how you find the right radio station and how do you actually approach them to get on radio. But let's say you've got that interview set up and you're preparing for this. The first thing to know is that the listeners are interested in finding out more. So there might be some nervousness, there might be some fear because you're behind the pen or the keyboard, but it's just to be relaxed because the listeners are ready for stories. And if you've got a great story to tell, that's awesome. So the preparation for the interview is try and be as prepared as possible without looking at notes. And that's probably my biggest advice that I can give you, because we often interview people here at the radio station. And if they come onto the radio station and they have a notepad in front of them or a book that they read from, there's a disconnect that happens with the personality that's interviewing them, but also with the listeners. And so my biggest advice is, you know your book. You've taken many, many hours to write it. You know the story behind the book. You know everything about it. They're not going to ask you a question that you don't know. So be prepared in that you know the inside out of the story, because they will ask you, where did the story come from? What was your inspiration? When did you start writing? It's all information that is part of your daily life. So the biggest thing is to be calm, have a few breathing exercises. Believe it or not, I do a lot of speaking in different webinars and also live events. I do tongue twisters and breathing exercises before almost every engagement, because it just helps settle the nerves and then it loosens up the mouth. So for those who are not used to being interviewed, that's probably a good place to start.
I think that's excellent advice. I always used to think it's crazy when you hear people say me, me, moo, mama, or whatever. So I can already feel myself yourself laughing doing it. So it actually just kind of like lifts your spirit for when you're going to go in, because the nerves are crazy. I mean,
Correct.
I know that when my daughter used to do her little plays, you know, I'm like quite an intense kind of person. And the one day the headmistress came to me and she said, when the play starts, can you and your husband sneak, like drop your bodies down so that your child can't see your face? I'm like, what? She needs to know where they're supporting, and she know, but when she sees you, she like, oh, I hope I don't make a mistake and mommy's not going to be proud of him. What?
Oh, so true.
It actually works. So I'm all for whatever works.
Yes,
now,
it does.
the next question that I have to ask is, it's all very well going onto the radio and being interviewed, but ultimately you want to make sales. And what is the best way of doing that without coming across too salesy on the interview?
Yes, so it's a very, very good question, because again, we can talk about our business or our book and we can make it sound most amazing and people can nod and say, oh, that's interesting. But what is the bridge? And that's my advice, is you've got to be able to build a bridge from the person that you're speaking to your book. So when you're there and you're being interviewed, you're giving some information that is relevant, but you're also creating curiosity. And so you make reference to your book quite often. You say to them that there's an amazing story in the book about X. And so if you're relating something that creates a curiosity in them, that curiosity drives intent. So we have a saying in marketing, is that all purchase decisions are emotion-based. So people will make a purchase decision based on their emotions and how they feel at the time. So if you're being interviewed, or if you're promoting or advertising your book, even if you do a book reading at a library or book club or something like that, it's about taking people into the story and leaving them wanting more. So that's the first thing. Then the second thing is you've got to create a bridge to make it easy for them to find your book. So if you say to them that it's in all good bookstores or it's available online, those are very general statements, and you're creating a possible point of friction where they have to go and search for this book. Whereas if you say to them, go onto Amazon, it's on this particular section, then it's easier, search for this and make sure that they know the title, etc. So you're creating that bridge. You've created curiosity for them to want to cross the bridge, and then the practicality of knowing how to cross the bridge. And that's probably going to be the best way for you to make sales. But I always say, if you're there for an interview, you give the information, you build the bridge, but then you've got to give them the next step along the way. So if you say to them, I'm going to be doing a reading at this particular book club, or I'm going to be online doing a webinar tomorrow, so make sure you tune in. Because we find, even with marketing, if you take it with advertising, a person has to engage with your message and then they have to hear it a few times before they act. And so with a book, you're taking people into a story and they're engaging with that, but also there's point of friction. Human beings, unfortunately, are lazy in nature. So it takes a lot of motivation and reminder. So if we have a few reminders, then there's a better chance that they will act. So if you tell them along the journey, I'm going to be here, you can watch this webinar, you can find me online, there's a video on YouTube, multiple points of engagement, there's more chance that they're going to act.
I love that. I've just recently done a sales program with the Uncovering Greatness team, and
Awesome.
you know, they speak about the different kinds of personalities. There's a thing that you can do called sales dogs, and it tells you the kind of personality that you have and what your strengths and weaknesses are as a salesperson. So one of mine is that I'm a golden retriever, so I'm very loyal, but I don't actually ask for the sale.
Okay.
And
that's good information.
So that actually ties up with what you're saying, is because I think with authors, naturally, a lot of them are introverted. And so they wouldn't necessarily ask for the sale. So it's good advice to be able to tell people about the building the bridge. This is where you're going to go and buy your book. This is, well, my book. This is where you're going to find me. That's really, really good advice. I think we have to be like, that you might have to take in on the notes, like put a little post-it note on the microphone and say, where can they find the book?
Correct. Correct. But most good interviewers will ask that because they understand that you're there to tell a story, but you're also there with a product, which will be the book. So most good interviewers will say at the end, where can they find you as a person? So obviously, and I've watched one of your previous videos where you talk about social media. So where can they find you as a person? So you, again, building your personality to them in that bridge. And then the next thing is where can they find the book? But it's very important to have that front and center, because to profile yourself and your book and your personality, and you don't profile where they can buy it or how they can download the book or however it works, then it's almost like this part is wasted.
That's true. Okay, now I'm going to ask you a little, because I come from a marketing background. So that's like my
Awesome.
first passion, my first love. And part of this channel is to be able to have people understand the business of books. So not just writing the story. I believe that writing the story is like in a business is your product development stage. Now we need to get that product out to the market. And it's like my pet hate is when people say to me, so how many books have you sold so far? I'm like, you wouldn't go to any other company when they're in product development stage and ask them how many products they've sold. Seriously. So
good.
So now you've got to find the right target market. And when I engaged with you previously, what intrigued me was about the stats on millennials and the young adult market. So for us, young adults is kind of, they say statistically it's 12 years old to 18 years old, but in reality, a lot of the people who are reading the books are actually a little bit older. So how does your readership work, or your listenership, let's put it that way, because we're not talking about radio, your listenership? You gave me some interesting figures about during COVID, what the drop-off was in listenership. How do authors navigate those stats so that they know who is the correct target market, which slot should they go in, those kinds of marketing statistics or profiles for our
Also, very good question. So radio is viewed as a traditional medium. So a lot of people who are very digitally savvy will often say traditional mediums are dying. And it's certainly true for one or two of the other mediums where potentially like print has experienced a lot of pressure because it's available online. TV slowly but surely is experiencing some pressure, but it's still very effective. But radio has been very, very consistent. Even though there's been technology to add to radio, it's been very consistent in the amount of people. Generally, in most countries around the world, radio has one of the highest penetrations, especially in South Africa. I can't remember the exact percentage, but it's over 90% of the population consume radio at some stage in their day-to-day lives. So it's a massive amount. But what they obviously look at when they viewing all mediums is they look at how the medium is decreasing or increasing. And so the stat that I gave is in the age group of 18 to 35, which sits in that millennial gap. They tracked a 5-year listening period, and they saw that it only went down 1.7%, which is negligible. It's a tiny, tiny amount. So we monitor as a radio station, we also monitor our age groups. And so we monitor in 4 segments. So 18 to 24, 24 to 35, 35 to 49, and 50 plus. And the 25 to 49 is our perfect age group. But there's an equal segment in the 20%. So 22, 23, 24 in that area across all 4 segments. So even in the 18 to 24 market, we have over 20% of our listenership, or we have 1 million listeners. So that's a lot of people in that young category that are still listening. And so you ask, how do we find what time and what radio station, etc. My advice is you've got to, know who you're writing for. And it could be a very broad target market, and that's great. And then you can go to multiple radio stations, which would be my advice, because your reach would be so much bigger. Or if you're aiming for a very specific target market, then you might want to find radio stations that aim for a similar target market. To get on radio is not that easy, actually. Especially if you look at commercial radio. So I'll talk about community, campus, and commercial. Community radio are smaller stations. They hyper serve a community. So it could be a Christian radio station. It could be a rural radio station. So all of those will feed into the target market. Campus is fairly obvious. It's a campus radio station, but obviously depending on what area they focus. So if you're aiming for a lot of younger market, campus radio is a great fit. And generally it's easier to get onto a campus radio station or a community radio station because they're very hungry for content and they're very hungry for local, either musicians, authors, artists in any way. They love that sort of content. Commercial radio, it's slightly more difficult. And I say that because commercial radio stations, they push for content. They're on the hunt for content all the time. So generally their content is quite full. So you'd have to work quite hard to carve out a piece. So you would, again, similarly, you'd have to create a bridge between you and the radio station. And we can chat about that as well. But that's what you would need to do, is line up your target market with the target market of the radio station you want to promote to.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And I think also what people need to understand, which I've learned as an author, is you have to practice delayed gratification, because it's not, you're not going to become an overnight success. We refer to it, we don't want to, as authors, we're not winning the lottery. We actually have to work at creating a presence in the market. It does take time. So, yeah, that's just a little thing that I've learned from my particular journey. Do you have any other advice or things that have sprung to mind while we've been chatting?
Definitely. So you spoke about not overnight success. I remember something that stood out for me about an artist of a band that was interviewed, and they were claimed to have overnight success. And the person interviewing them said, what has led to your overnight success? And he laughed and he said, actually, it's 10 years of gigging at small venues, at small parties, and growing over time. And then we were discovered, and it led to an overnight success. So it was perceived to be. And I think as an author, that's probably going to be the same thing, is that you have to grind. Don't give up. If you're passionate about your book, get out there, do the radio interviews, do your social media, try and get to book clubs and book readings and all of those wonderful things, and be persistent, and you'll find that. So my last piece of advice is under the word influence, is that I was having a conversation with someone the other day where we were talking about comedians, for example. I mean, there's so many comedians on the planet today, and there's some that are undiscovered but are really great. But it takes that point of influence, and they play to a comedian. So there's a story about Billy Connolly, who was a phenomenal, I think he's passed away now, but a phenomenal Scottish comedian, but just couldn't break it into the global market. Great in Scotland. And Whoopi Goldberg was on holiday and went to one of his shows in Scotland and absolutely loved him and said that she could hardly breathe. And so what she decided to do was invite him to open for her at one of her comedy tours. And it led to massive success. So my advice to authors is try and get in front of someone who's a place of influence and try and get them to read your book. So you've got to find the readers, find the kindred spirits that have influence over your future. So if it's someone at a radio station, you might pop into a radio station and say, do you know who the great readers are? Who loves to read? And then you might get them a copy of your book, whether you email a digital copy or whether you've got a hard copy, however you do it. They might read it and absolutely love it. It could be a radio personality. It could be an influencer, a social media influencer who loves to read. It could be, so my advice is find that person of influence, and they could light the fire that spreads.
That's excellent advice. I found that the biggest thing that I've had to learn, and it doesn't happen overnight, is to find your tribe. So when I released the first book, I was kind of flying solo. That was incredibly hard. When I say flying solo, I mean, I had my family gave me incredible support. I think my husband has become to associate the back of my head as actually being me, because every time he gets up, I'll be at the computer working away. That's the first thing you see in the back of my head. But in terms of people that are going to influence and help you, I actually only got those people in the second book. And that's not discrediting my wonderful editor who was with me right from the start, but I'm saying people that were growing my influence. So those are only a handful of people, but if you get them right in the beginning, they journey with you and eventually it will grow. So my second book has just come out for release now on Amazon. And because it's a series, I'm finding that people are buying the first book, even though I'm not marketing the first book. Because it just starts organically growing that, but you don't get that in the beginning. It takes time to build up your influence. You've got to be patient. So I want to say thank you so much for joining us today. It's really been fantastic. You are a sales manager, so obviously you want to drive sales for the radio station. If there are people who are wanting to advertise on your radio station, what kinds of businesses and things would need to be positioned on your station, and how can they get hold of you in order to get quotes and find out more about the radio station's offering?
Sure. So we're in the business of partnering with multiple types of businesses to access a market. So we're very fortunate over the years that we've built up a listenership of 1 million people, and our digital footprint is massive. We obviously see the value in digital. So we have, it's normally around 700,000 or 800,000 people that come onto our website every single month. And then our social media is also very high, 300,000 for Facebook and 500,000 for Twitter. So we always partner with businesses to access a specific market, but based on their budget. So we have very small businesses that come on board. We have a program on our website. So if anyone is interested, they can visit the East Coast Radio website. It's ecr.ca and click on Lock and Load. And you could actually have an advert on primetime radio for 2,250 Rand. So it's a very very low starting point for businesses. And one of the primetime presenters will read out a script, which will help you put together to promote your product or your book. Then there's other methods. We can put banners on our website, and those start from as little as 4,000 Rand. And then it grows from there. Obviously, there's large businesses like banks and insurance companies that spend a huge amount of money. But our job is to engage with you, understand your target market and your message, and then help you market that message to the right person. A good place to start is the East Coast Radio website, like I say, or you're more than welcome to email me directly and I will give my advice absolutely free of charge. And my email address is Brenden. It's spelled differently. It's BRENDEN @ecr.ca.za. And like I say, more than happy to give advice and point you in the right direction. If I can help, I absolutely will.
Oh, well, that's pretty cool. So that's back to side. So, Brenden, I want to say thank you once again for the wonderful advice that you've given us, the tips you've given us. Everyone at the bottom, I'm going to put Brenden's email address and also the website. Brenden, if you can maybe drop me an email before I load up the video, and then just give me the website details for small businesses where they are going to link on to be able to take advantage of that phenomenal offer. I mean, I didn't even think that was possible. I've grown up loving radio. I used to listen to Inspector Carr Investigates. And I knew it was time to go to sleep when that Richelieu ad used to come on. It was some kind of brandy ad. Richelieu ad was quite late. Then I'm like, I should be asleep now, else I'm not going to wallet. And one of the things that I really loved is when I was sick and I was at home, I used to listen to the stories on the radio.
Yes.
And there was this one thriller where I almost jumped completely out of the bed because there was this murderer and they took an axe and they hit it into the grandfather clock and it made this bong, terrible sound. I was terrified of it.
Oh gosh.
My parents.
Yeah, radio is definitely theatre of the mind.
Absolutely. I miss those days, and I think a lot of people do, which is why Audible is becoming such a big thing.
Correct.
So everyone who is on my fan base, my still growing fan base, watch out, because at the end of January, my books are going to be on Audible. The first one's going on to Audible.
Awesome.
The second one will come out round about February. We finalized the voiceover artists yesterday or during this week. And so I'm very, very excited, because I can then relive that adventure in the mind kind of thing. I wish my kids could have that.
Yes, exactly.
Super. So remember,
Awesome.
pop out, subscribe if you want to watch more videos. And Brenden, you've been an absolutely superstar. I've really enjoyed this interview. Thank you so much for being here, and have a super day.
Thank you so much.